All right, I think we are officially live right now, and sorry for being just a few minutes late here, and sorry for being a little scruffy. I have been running around the state a little bit lately, and there's just been a lot going on. So if you don't know what you just logged on to today, this is my name's Glen Morgan, this is We the Governed, and this is our live stream, Ask Me Anything, Tuesday night, trying to kind of get back into the regular routine because we went for about a month without doing these. And I know I had my first live stream in about a month here just last Thursday, but figured I'd kind of get back into it. Just a quick reminder for those of you who have regularly done this show with me in the past. Normally, I would have the question right down here. If you post a question up, I would have it right down here, and then you'd know what question I'm answering. But I still haven't gotten set up to do that yet in the studio again. So I will be looking at your questions over here on a computer that I'm going to move a little bit closer to me so it's easier for me to see. And just a quick reminder to make it a little bit easier, I think. Please make sure you use the @WeTheGoverned. Because it will make it a little bit easier for me to see the questions when you go to ask those, and then I'll know for sure what questions are coming my way. Just a real quick overview. There are a couple of things I do try to do in the beginning of the show, and I need to get my act together here to do it better. And one of them is I try to give an update real quick on places that I'll be if you want to see me live. And I did have a list of a variety of these that are coming up here. October 2nd, I know I'm doing a breakfast presentation in Edmonds. It's really early, actually. I think that one starts at 7:30. So I can't remember the name of the group that I'm doing out there, but I think that's a Republican Women's Club meeting out there. I might be wrong about that, but I know I'm going to be out there doing a presentation there. October 9th, I will be at the 30th Ledge District Republicans in Federal Way. If you were in Washougal this weekend, I saw you down there Saturday at the event that was going on for the 17th Ledge District Republicans. That was good to see a lot of friends and familiar faces and some new people as well. On October 11th, which is going to be a Saturday, I'm going to be at the Jefferson County Oktoberfest out in Port Townsend with the Republican Party out there, speaking at that event. And I think it's at the Scout Cabin, if you're familiar with that, out there in Port Townsend. So a good event. You'll be able to find more information about it if you go to the Jefferson County Republican website. So it's some of my friends up there in Clown County, and you want to come by and say hi, come on down to the Oktoberfest Lincoln Day dinner that the Republicans are hosting out there in Jefferson County. I have 3 confirmed Doge Washington training classes set up right now. In October. One is going to be October 15th up in Fremont, and that'll be, usually we do those, sign up starts around 5:15, program starts at 6, and the next day, October 16th, which is, I believe that's a Thursday, I'll be in Kent at the 47th Ledge District Republicans event. Now that'll have a slightly different start schedule because they're doing their meeting, I believe, first before I do, I don't know if it's a full Doge training, and just have to see how it fits, Doge Washington training, to see how it fits there. And then October 29th, I'm going to be out there doing a Doge Washington training in Burien with a location yet to be announced. There are a couple of other events that are also going on coming up this month, but I didn't have a chance to double check my calendar in time to put them all in here. But those are all events. There's actually a heavy emphasis here looking at the schedule with King County, which is not super common actually. And there are a couple of Doge Washington training classes that I want to try to get organized. One should be out in Bellingham, and another one should be out in Ellensburg. We just haven't finalized it, and I know there's going to be another one in North King County as well. I believe that one will probably be in early November. But there's a lot of different events and activities coming up, so a lot of chances for you to see me, especially if you live anywhere in Washington State. If you want to see me in person and ask questions or give me a hard time, that's fine. And just a real quick, for those of you who have not been paying attention over the last few days, the Let's Go Washington people have done this huge launch of their signature gathering around the state, and it has been absurd and crazy. The Crazed Leftists have been coming out of the woodwork, and at Evergreen State College, I don't know, I mean, I say that as a kind of default setting, so I'm not actually totally sure that there's any Evergreen State College grads that have been attacking them, but It's that same kind of mindset that you're seeing out there where they're just being attacked all over the place. Weird, Tacoma, Bonnie Lake, all over the state. And cases of them stealing initiative sheets and hopping in their car and then doing a hit and run on other people at the store. You had people that have been arrested now for attacking the signature gatherers in various Walmarts and Fred Meyers around the state. It's been kind of a circus out there, and the left, of course, is ginning it up on purpose. There's Reddit pages and threads where they're trying to get their followers or get as many people that are crazed out there to try to stop them. And just a reminder, the two initiatives, one is just to protect girls' sports so that boys aren't playing in girls' sports, and the other one is to restore the parental rights that the state legislature tried to take away. The Democrats, of course, are also melting down over this whole issue, and frankly, it looks like there's a lot of popular support for it. So I actually anticipate there'll be some kind of an event in Tumwater coming up this weekend with the Let's Go Washington folk. They're really doing a great job kind of blanketing the state right now, and there is a lot of support out there for both these initiatives. Anybody who's ever bothered to do any polling clearly shows that they're both very popular issues and that those people really want them, and they are going on right now. And their deadline is they have to have them done by the end of the year, turn them in at the end of December. So you'll probably be hearing them do if you haven't been to one of these turn-in events, they're great events in Tumwater where they submit in the signature sheets to the Secretary of State's office. And I've been to several of those in the past. Some of you have been too. It's just a good thing to see. It's kind of, you're witnessing, civic action in process right there. And so it's kind of fun to see that process. If you've watched, there were two videos that I did recently since I did the last live stream that have gotten a little bit more attention just recently, and if you've been on the channel. One of them is about, I guess I did three of them, but one of them was the Bikini Barista Brown, our Attorney General, ignoring organized crime, ignoring massive fraud, ignoring protecting the initiative gatherers, of course, and instead focusing his energy on the Bikini Barista issue, making sure that they get their full pay at the Bikini Barista coffee shops up north in Snohomish County is where that one was mainly focused on. A lot of funny comments on that video, so if you haven't seen it, feel free to add your comments in because there's quite a few of them that are funny. Nick Brown is calling it in, zooming in his AG's office from Seattle, where he actually lives. So this is another situation where we have kind of an AWOL kind of elected official who's just letting the bureaucrats do whatever they want at the Attorney General's office in that case. And then we have our governor, Bob Ferguson, our dear leader, who apparently is traveling, gallivanting around somewhere outside of the state. He didn't bother to let anybody know in advance that he was going to be leaving, with the exception of the lieutenant governor, who basically, under state law and under the Constitution, when the governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor steps in and fills his roles, which in our case is Denny Heck. He's lieutenant governor right now. So he's filling in for Bob Ferguson. Well, Bob Ferguson is somewhere in the world, not letting anybody know where he's at. Supposedly he's on some kind of vacation. His staff has been very quiet and secretive about it. He's going to some kind of conference. We don't know what it is, and supposedly he has some meetings. Some people think that he's trying to be prepared for the inevitable Department of Justice lawsuit against the state. I don't know. Is he going to trying to find a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S.? I don't know. Is he just trying to meet with George Soros and some of his funders outside of the state where he can maybe have his meetings without much observation? We don't know. But either way, the Where's Waldo Governor Ferguson video has also gotten a lot of attention, as it should, because the story broke in the center square last Friday. And I do think it's a relevant question, is what the heck's going on with the governor? For all of Inslee's faults, and they were legion, and Gregoire too, Governor Gregoire as well, generally they were fairly open about their calendar and where they were going to be at. However, unlike both of those previous governors, Governor Ferguson just is nowhere to be found. I mean, he's just an absent governor. He lives in Seattle, doesn't bother to come down to Olympia unless he has to come down to a press conference and complain about Trump. He's pretty much has very, very limited press conferences, and they're only limited to just a couple of journalists, most of whom, other than Brandy Cruz, they're all too timid to ask any questions, and so they just sit there like lumps on a log. And I guess their goal is just to promote whatever narrative Ferguson's feeding him. But he's also just not around. And one of the problems that I mentioned in that video, and this has been widely reported in the like insiders in Olympia. It's not necessarily in the media because they don't want to admit this, or they certainly don't want to report the truth. But a lot of the agency heads are also just zooming it in. They're working from home or a beach in the Bahamas, I don't know. But they aren't around, and there's no way to reach them. So if you're a lobbyist or you're trying to work with an agency, the head guy's not there. And while the cat's away, the mice will play. Not that we have any good agency heads in the state, but for the ones that are there, they're just not even there. We got this like weird government that's no longer around most of the time if you're a person in a position of power. And then obviously a lot of the employees are still doing the forever COVID excuse of lockdown work from home programs too. Even though Microsoft and Amazon, some of these other companies are going away from that, it didn't work too well. The state agencies and the bureaucracy, King County comes to mind. They've been, even though they said they were going to change this a year ago, that most of their employees are also working from home. And so what it means is you're paying, again, as I've said many times, platinum prices for garbage government. And it's one of the reasons why we are, everything's kind of descending into this chaotic mess anywhere you look in the state, and all the budgets are out of control. Now, if you are logging into this channel and you were in Thurston County, you would know from the 2:30 meeting that you might have had today, where there were a lot of people that came to that commissioner meeting complaining about the as yet unpublished budget and as yet obvious financial disaster that probably some of the worst people that's ever been put into a local county government are in Thurston County. And not every single one of them, but we certainly have 3 that are complete loony clowns out of the 5. And they are, of course, financially illiterate and incompetent and destructive. And so what they want to do, of course, is always cut the sheriff's office first. That's the highest priority, which is getting a lot of blowback from the people because that's about the only department in Thurston County that anybody actually cares about. So it's kind of interesting just to see the dynamics here, and what I was warning you about in videos I did years ago. Same with John Pettit, who's been just a dedicated activist on the financial side of things. Thurston County's sowed its seeds of financial incompetence with the clowns they had in government at that time, and it just has continued to grow and become the mess that is on full display and for Exhibit A for looking at what's going on in Thurston County, which, by the way, they actually can cut the money that they need from the existing budget. And they can do it by cutting stuff that nobody cares about and that's totally irrelevant or even harmful to the community. They can do that. So it's not like this budget problem is unsolvable. It's that they don't want to solve it. And that's really the issue that I think we're dealing with. So I'm going to jump right in here. We got a lot of things to talk about and a lot of questions that people are throwing up there. So let me just jump into some of the questions. It is an Ask Me Anything video. First question here, Jason Fisher. Hey Glenn, hope you're well. I'm honestly confused on Oregon state government position, the National Guard and federal property. They deny an Antifa problem and afraid of their voters, I think. Well, I mean, here's the one thing. For those of you who've been living in a box and not paying much attention to the media, don't blame you, but obviously Trump has said he's going to send out the military, actually, although I believe it is the National Guard at this point, to come down and help protect the federal buildings, the ICE building, specifically in Portland. And there's a big local drama related to this where they're saying, hey, people are sharing videos of the riots from 2020 and 2021, which were obviously much bigger than the riots that we've had lately. And we have had some mini riots lately with whatever's left of the Antifa crew down there, and kind of cosplaying with their guillotines and fireworks and masks and assaulting people that they don't like in the area. But it's really not as big or as impressive as it was back in the 2020 and 2021 during the COVID lockdown time when nobody had anything else better to do. You still have, of course, Antifa people that don't have anything better to do, and so they're still coming out at night in the dark and causing chaos. But there's really just not as many as there were at that time. So but of course the panic in Portland is now suddenly they want to pretend like everything's great in Portland. It's true that they aren't having quite as many people getting murdered in Portland as they did in 2022. So the murder rate has dropped. They did chase a lot of good people out of Portland, but they did destroy a lot of businesses in Portland. Oregon State's a basket case, just like Washington, just like California, when it comes to incompetent, bad governance, horrible fiscal decisions, and a decisive trend towards bizarre behavior. But the panic about the National Guard coming in to protect a federal building is a little absurd. It's an overreaction. I don't know if, to some extent, sometimes I feel like Trump just trolls these guys just to see, how they actually react to his statements. But I don't know that it's even that big of a deal that he said that, and I don't really see a lot of big changes related to that specific issue. But we'll see. There's a question here from Chris Friedman. Did you see the reports the Department of Licensing issued licenses from California that were no name given? Yeah. Do you expect Washington will be in the same place as that license scheme? I am sure that every dumb, bad idea that California has, Washington State has been in some kind of competition with California and New York and Colorado and Oregon and a bunch of these other states to see who can be the most absurd state and how they squander and destroy the people's trust with the abusing everything from the voter rolls to how they kick out driver's licenses. So I haven't found that exact issue that'd be actually hard to find in the records request. Like I don't think that they would be obligated to provide a records request of the name of everybody that gives a driver's license. I don't think you can actually get that data. So you'd have to get somebody who works there and actually find out how many of those are out there. But now that you say it, this is a fun thing to look into. And on top, I've got a couple of other stories I can't really talk about, but there's massive scandals. You have no idea what's coming. There's some really big scandals in Washington, I think, that will be exposed at some point in time based on whistleblower information and other things that we're uncovering out there. The Doge Washington people, listen, there's some good people getting involved who care and are starting to pay attention and grinding away. It's thankless work in the background. People just start to dig through finances, dig through public records, recruiting whistleblowers, finding sources, and the information that we're getting, I think, is pretty impactful. And I think it's going to impact Washington State pretty dramatically moving forward. Second question, actually, Christine, this one's from Christina Main. If you would like venue options in Ellensburg, please let me know. Well, I do, and I think we want to do an event there. I had thought about, there's a couple good Ellensburg locations that I would probably use, but I just really need to have in order for me to organize a Doge Washington training event, usually what we do is I'll work with a local group that's already kind of organized, so there's some level of interest. And then they can help on like local promotion and just making sure the venue is set up. And then I'll come out and do the training and the presentation. So usually weekday nights tend to work best. Monday through Thursday, one of those weeknights. I prefer it not to be Tuesdays just because then I have to move around my live stream. But again, if there's no other choice, we can do that. But Ellensburg is a good place, and I need to do one out there. There's been several requests and a variety of people that I have talked to. We just haven't really organized that one yet. But as soon as we do, I'll announce where that location is. And we should do one there before the end of the year because there's a lot of good opportunities to dig up things. And we need more and more people trained, not fewer people trained. Let's see. Jason Fisher, what's your thoughts on businesses being surprised by new taxes? Why didn't they participate in the legislative process? It would have helped. They probably voted for these politicians. Yeah, good point. And here's a great... listen, I know they've had several news stories recently because several of the dumb taxes that the legislature proposed weren't widely advertised really at the time. And one of the things to remember is that we don't really have a traditional media anymore. So the only way you might have known some of this is if it was reported by one of the conservative people paying attention. And let's face it, the audience is not wide enough yet even for like a lot of the insiders, people who are more involved in the political process, who are conservative and they're paying attention to it. We would know perhaps that there's a lot of dumb, bad ideas and stupid taxes being proposed. I know I did a couple videos about a few of them, but the average person probably has no idea. And some of these taxes are just so stupid that probably average people think it isn't possible that we've elected people who are that clownish and incompetent and ignorant to the state legislature that they would actually propose that level of stupid taxes. But unfortunately for their assumptions, that's not true. We have found the worst people that we can scrounge up in our state, thrown them into government and told them to run the state, and the incompetence and corruption that inevitably follows from that is self-evident. These taxes are kind of an example of that. The truth is the state's going to have to cut its budget substantially, and whether they like it or not. And so some of the grifting operations are going to have to go away. And inevitably, layoffs are coming for state workers, whether they want to accept that or not. I realize the unions are going to probably blow a gasket over it. Every month you delay, it just gets worse. So there'll be more state workers that get laid off compared to how many would have to be laid off now. Now, the triangulation that typically goes on when you have incompetent people, and remember, half this Washington State Democrats, at least at the legislative level, they believe that math either isn't real or that it's racist, one or the other. And so that level of dysfunction and incompetence within your caucus makes it very difficult on the Democrat side to come up with anything rational. And to be fair, the Republicans in the House and the Senate did propose alternative bills that or budgets that were rational, logical, and didn't require tax increases. But the Democrats couldn't have that. So Governor Ferguson, even though he pretended like he cared about reducing costs, but he never really wanted to reduce costs. And one of the approaches that they'll take, and this is lazy budget cutting, where they say 5%, right? They don't want to make a judgment call within an agency. They just say we need 5% cuts. Well, what the agencies typically do, the game the bureaucrats typically play, is they'll pick something in that agency that people actually care about, that actually has some value. That's what they choose to cut, not because it's the best thing to cut, but because by cutting it, there will be some kind of blowback. It lets them generate public support. Nobody cared about the rest of the agency, but the 5% they're trying to cut, that's the one part they actually care about. And so they know that by doing that, that's how they leverage and force them. It makes it so they don't have to cut, or they think it's going to lead to not making legitimate cuts within the agency. Because sometimes when they have to make those cuts, it reveals an exceptional level of waste that exists in every single one of these state agencies. There's all kinds of things you can cut before you cut critical services. There's most of it you could cut before you have to cut critical services. But instead, the demeanor is, and the attitude and the strategy with most of these agency heads is to actually cut critical services willfully and with malice and with knowledge, so that generates some kind of blowback in the business community or the public or something. And then they can use that leverage to then retain their budget or keep their budget high. Which is why when we get a real governor in there at some point in time, a real person, not the fake guys that we've had lately, but somebody who's actually in there willing to lead, they're going to have to go through these agencies at kind of an executive level sort of thing and dive in and identify very specifically and clearly the cuts that can come into these agencies. Good percentage of them you can cut by 30%, and the public will never notice, and the world would be a better place to do it. Let's get to some of the questions. Sorry, there's a bunch of other questions coming up, and I am missing them. But yeah, the businesses that are being surprised, Jason, as you mentioned there, listen, average people have stuff to do in their lives, and they aren't paying attention to all the internal drama going on in Olympia. And then you still do elect people with the presumption that they have an IQ above 80 and that they believe math is real and they're semi-functional, and we just haven't done that. Let's see. I'm trying to go down here and find a question. Who's working on Oregon? This is from Terry, I think. Who's working on Oregon? Anything in the watch on them? There are good people down in Oregon, and if you're with a group down in Oregon and you want to get a little bit more organized, you want me to come down and do a presentation to your group, I'll happily do it. I live in Washington, but there's a lot of similarities between Oregon and Washington, and so if you have a group down there that's interested in becoming more assertive and aggressive and actually digging into some of the budgets and finding the fraud or corruption or just opportunities to cut waste, I'm happy to come in and train you on how to do that. And Oregon is a good state to do that. I mean, Oregon and Washington and Idaho, whether anybody wants to accept or not, the bad or good stuff and bad stuff cross the border, right? For some reason, bad, dumb ideas that come out of Seattle or Portland don't just stay there. They immediately infect Boise, they immediately affect Laramie, they affect Billings, they affect the rest of the country, and they infect it probably more than they effect it. And so this is going on all the time. This is why you can't allow an egregious level of corruption or incompetence to exist or persist any length of time in the country, wherever it is, without addressing it pretty solidly. Because if you don't address it, it spreads. Bad ideas spread, just like a virus, and far more deadly. And so this is the situation that we're in. So I'm happy to help any of my friends down in Oregon. I can't organize it for you in the sense of organizing the venue or it's just there's a level of logistics that are involved there. If you take care of that part, I will be there and I will help do the training. So reach out to me and let me know who I need to talk to down there. Happy to come down there, Eugene, Portland, anywhere that you're organized to where it'd be better if you have a big enough group that it makes it worthwhile. So probably 40 people would be nice. Then I could come down and I can do more follow-up training down there as well because we do need to fix this stuff. Let's see. Jason Fisher, how will the shutdown affect Washington State? Pretty frustrating for congregational Republicans. I'm assuming you mean congressional Republicans, waiting until the last second to resolve the budget in private sector. You would be jailed. Now, that's true. Well, this is a good question. And so I'm going to base my answer to this question based on what we have seen in the past on government shutdowns. I would anticipate that the most visible evidence of a government shutdown, because they're not really shutdowns, they're like, they kind of shut things down, but they're only shutting down certain parts. Like Social Security doesn't shut down, the military doesn't shut down, the Department of Revenue doesn't really shut down, ICE isn't going to shut down, the Border Control doesn't shut down. So the question is what's left, right? So the EPA offices over in Lacey will not be, there won't be anybody in the EPA offices. If for some reason you're masochistic and you decide you want to go over there and see what they were up to, they won't be there. Same with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which is actually located in that building right behind the EPA. They won't be there either. It's Marine Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. That's their main office in that area. I would anticipate you probably don't have, they might shut down the federal parks. That's an interesting thing. So, and for us, that would really be Mount Rainier mostly, and the Olympics. I remember during a shutdown back in the 90s when I was driving around and I wanted to camp out, they had put some kind of, they put like a little sign out there that said the park wasn't open. And I wanted to camp in that park. And I remember I just moved the sign and I went and camped anyway and did the right thing, didn't make a mess, just camped and there was nobody to pay. So I remember doing that back then in the 90s. And so I imagine that you'll have that kind of thing going on as well. That tends to be the most visible thing. Like if you've made this plan and you're gonna take your family up to see Mount Rainier, maybe they have it closed, or maybe they just leave it open and the gift shop's not there. I hope that's kind of what they do, is they would leave it open so that, and maybe you don't go buy anything at the gift shop, but at least you can still go up and see Mount Rainier. I'm not sure, but that's what I would expect. You might see some changes to other programs. If you're a business and you require federal like engagement or something, like you would see that just shut down. You wouldn't see the reports. I mean, one thing to remember, Washington State is 3,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. The big impact is in D.C. Now, the question is, does the Trump administration actually do widespread layoffs, like permanent RIFs, which stands for reduction in force? If they really do RIFs, then the government shutdown's great, and hopefully they can get rid of a whole bunch of really worthless bureaucrats that we don't need. But I don't know. I mean, they say they're going to do that, but I've been disappointed before, so we'll see. I'm hoping that that's actually what happens. Otherwise, I would expect at the state level, Ferguson and his friend, now Ferguson's on vacation and gone until October 9th, apparently. We don't know where he's at. And so maybe he'll be zooming it in or use ChatGPT or some kind of AI program to announce his anger and frustration at Trump. You could probably do that pretty easily, really. Just take an AI program, look at what Ferguson said anytime in the last 12 years, or at least since, let me think about this, since 2016, so 8 years, I guess, at this point in time. But and you could probably use AI and just create fake statements that just are kind of a combination of what he said in the past. Most people really won't be able to tell the difference. And so that may be one way that Ferguson stays on vacation and not paying attention to Washington at all, but he pretends like he's really here, and his staff would probably collude with him in that process. So we should be watching for that. And that's always a good question. Every time there's a statement that comes out of the governor's office, did Ferguson use ChatGPT, or is this actually his own words? It's a guessing game, and we can't know easily, but we could really pay attention and start asking. Let's see. Here's a question. John Spring. Sorry, if you do at We the Governor, it's a little bit easier for me to pick out the questions. There's usually a lot of comments that kind of come through. And so John Spring's question is, what is your prediction for 2028? Who do you think will jump in the race for governor? That's a good question. There's probably, one of the likely names that's out there, and listen, nobody's committed and nobody's said they're going to run, right, for sure. A lot of times people will, the speculation and people are floating different names out there. You always have the potential, though, for a Republican who has the ability to finance the operation pretty well and has some level of name recognition. And my guess is you aren't going to have anybody serious say they're going to run for governor until after the elections of 2026, the midterms. And the reason for that is just mostly logical and logistical. The minute you say in Washington, which is different than at the federal level, that you don't do an exploratory committee under the public disclosure rules in Washington State. If you say I'm exploring running, you essentially are really starting the process of creating your political action committee and starting to report expenses and all the paperwork involved in doing that. So usually I would expect somebody, if they're going to do it, to announce, if they're serious about doing it, to announce basically right after the 2026 midterm elections. And there's two reasons for that. One is the paperwork hassle and documentation, so once they get that going. Secondly is also going to be they're going to watch to see what the election results are in Washington in the midterms. Turnout numbers, distribution versus predictions. Is there a surge of Republican voters? What has the impact of the federal changes to the law? Has that made a change? Have they cleaned up Washington State's voter rolls? Are we eliminating mail-in voting? There's a bunch of actually pretty dramatic and potentially significant things that are out there right now that logically would change things. And I would say that if they clean up the Washington State voter rolls, and especially if mail-in voting is no longer allowed, I would say that you may have a crowded Republican field that would enter with a reasonable expectation that a Republican could win in Washington. If, especially that's true if the Republicans pick up House seats in the state legislature, state House and Senate. Really, that's my main focus. I'm not really so much looking at the governor's race in 2028 as I am looking at the midterm elections in 2026. Because after this off-year election this November, and you have two seats, the 26th legislative district, which is out on the peninsula, Republican Michelle Caldeer, if she's able to win, that adds a Republican seat, a very important seat because it prevents the Democrats from having a supermajority in the Senate. And if she gets in there, that blocks a bunch of dumb ideas that the Democrats would try to be pushing through, because right now the Republicans are fairly unified, a little bit easier when you're a smaller group, and the Democrats are just sounding more unhinged every day. And then you also have the 5th legislative district out in Issaquah with Chad Magendas running, which both of them were behind in the primary with an exceptionally low turnout, probably one of the lowest turnout primaries we've seen in years in the state. And the numbers can change substantially when you go into the general election and there's a little bit more awareness that there's an election going on instead of in August when everybody's on vacation. So if the Republicans pick up one or both of those seats, that's a huge, huge win. You also have a lot of school board races going on with a lot of level of drama that's related to those races all around the state. Some local races in the cities and some of the counties, but mostly you're going to see city races. The only county elections you're going to have right now in 2025 are going to be the ones that are charter counties. There's 7 counties that are charter counties, so those races matter. You have a couple of different places where there's a charter review commission going on, Clark County, Pierce County, for example. And so those races really do matter right now. But what any serious governor candidate campaign is looking at is going to have to be the 2026 elections. So they're going to want to see how those numbers change and reflect the changing mood potentially going on in Washington State right now. And you can't be a serious Republican candidate running for governor unless you really have obvious and fairly immediate access to $10 million or so just to get out the gate. I just don't think it's that realistic otherwise. You need to have name recognition enough that you can hit the ground running pretty hard. That's a limited, smaller group of people that would be in that potential category. I kind of don't want to, it's fairly obvious what the potential options would be, but we'll see what happens. have you ever thought, this is from Kathleen, have you ever thought that Bobby Ferguson might be at the WEF at this time? And when you say WEF, I'm assuming you're talking about the World Economic Forum. That is possible, and it would fit with who he is. Plus, that's where some of his big donors he's probably looking at, and the Soros crowd, they'd be out there, so he'd probably be trying to hook up with them on the sidelines and see what's going on. But he's, he lives in super secret land right now, so the public certainly doesn't know for sure where he's at or where he's planning to be. And as I mentioned in my last video, there is a way to find it out after the fact pretty easily, but you file the records request and you figure for a security detail and look at where their expenses are from, and that'll give you a sense of where they're at. But you don't get it ahead of time. It's after the fact. You don't figure that out for another couple weeks afterwards. Chris Friedman, have our Democrats in Washington not understand a Laffer curve when it comes to raising taxes? I'm assuming what you mean is how have. Well, you got to remember how poorly educated most overeducated people that exist in the state legislature or in any form of government really are. No, they probably don't understand the Laffer curve. And for those of you who don't know, it's a model that was created years ago. Basically, the more taxes, once you reach a certain point, keep raising taxes, you actually collect less revenue, which is what's happening in Washington State. The collective stupidity and just egregious incompetence of the political class and not recognizing the reality here. They raise taxes to the point where they basically aren't getting anywhere near the taxes they thought they were going to get. And businesses, of course, adjust and change their behavior, as do wealthy individuals, as does everybody, when they realize that the taxes are so high, or that they're just high enough to incrementally start to push people out of businesses or business opportunities that they might otherwise pursue. It's not worth the risk. And when you're paying platinum prices for garbage government, as we are in Washington right now, the only people that don't realize that are the ones on the inside who are, creating the grant grifting and just general grifting operations in general, or they live in the bubble that's so limited to Evergreen State College grads or whatever little world that they're in that they literally have no clue what's happening out there in the community. And believe me, unfortunately, there's quite a few people like that. And they're all in government for sure. Or they work at the colleges, which is basically the same thing. So there's a lot of interesting craziness going on. Let's see, Jack Palder, challenge for you. Can you name 5 things that have made our lives better in Washington State in the last 10 years? Well, when you talk about that generically or individually, it's a good question. I would say that Trump has actually made life better in Washington State in the last 10 years, surprisingly. And that did surprise me a little bit. I believe that the general wake-up of citizens in the state, because of bad things being done by bad government, whether that's somebody who woke up during COVID and realized that these guys are lying to us, the lockdown lunacy, the abusive nature of the state where it's kind of woken up people. So number 2, so number 1, I think Trump has actually done a lot of good things, surprisingly, for Washington State. And I say surprisingly because politicians always they promise to make change and improvement, and even good ones oftentimes don't. Not always because they don't want to, but just because of the way things are structured, the difficulty of turning that battleship around, the inertia and momentum of bad governance is difficult to fix. But so number 1, Trump. Number 2, the fact that suddenly, for the first time since anybody watching this has been alive, the percentage of people in our state that are engaged and involved in the political process and paying attention to it is guaranteed much, much higher than it ever has been before. Number 3, because of the lockdown world and the craziness and lunacy of Inslee and everybody else, they really have turned a much higher percentage of Washington State into homeschool preppers than they ever would have been before. No amount of education, training, or promotion of being more prepared and independent or homeschooling your people at home ever would have worked compared to having crazies in government to convince people that it's much wiser to start taking control of your own life. I think that's good. Number 5, Chris Reichdahl, as head of the Office Superintendent of Public Instruction, is a total clown, and being such an idiot and so clownish and so absurd in his behavior, he's really helped drive a large percentage, 51,000 some odd families, out of the public school system and into private school mostly, some of them into homeschool, and that is actually improving the educational potential in Washington State, because clearly the public school system, the way it's set up right now, is collapsing under its own level of incompetence. No matter how much money you put into it, every reading, math, everything is just diving downhill. I'm going to throw in a bonus sixth thing. The exposure of Evergreen State College and the collapse of student enrollment there by over 50% in a short period of time with 4 rounds of staff layoffs, nothing but good for the world, nothing but good for Washington State, and the inevitable end of that university is going to be somewhere out there on the horizon. It's probably coming pretty quick. Those are good things, and this is a way that Washington State's getting better. One thing that happens when you see a state like Washington that goes through political turmoil caused by particularly incompetence and poorly run government, the people, the next generation that kind of steps in to fix and clean that mess up and fix what's broken, they actually tend to run government better than they ever would have had they not had that recent experience. I do believe that that's kind of what's on the horizon for our state. But again, we still have to be involved and engaged and show up and trying to do something there. Sorry, the questions keep bouncing up here pretty quick. Here's a question from John Meckelfresh. What do you think is the possibility of President Trump appointing a federal prosecutor that will actually dig into the corruption in the state and that people here face charges? That's a good question, and I actually am kind of modifying my opinion on this as we move forward. Number one, it does look like the DOJ is actually filing litigations again, or actually filing genuine lawsuits and investigations into a variety of states. And as I've said in some of my videos in the past, Washington State's not the biggest, nor are we the number one state on any of the federal agencies' lists as far as investigations. Mostly because, as much as it's the center of the University U and I, the corrupt politicians that we have out here are really considered amateur hour compared to what they're dealing with in Illinois, New York, and California, for example. And there's also more of a political outcome in focusing on states like Arizona and Nevada and Pennsylvania and to some extent Michigan and Wisconsin as well, just because those states are kind of political swing states. So it's inevitable, I should say, that priorities sometimes overlap. Partisan political priorities, for swing state type of projects are going to probably shift to the higher priority. And in states like ours, we will look. What it looks like they're going to come after out here is going to be the voting. I would expect probably the first major lawsuit to be filed against Washington State, like a genuine deep dive Department of Justice investigation, would go into the voting system out here first. Probably roughly around the same time, it's going to be going into the misuse of federal funds to support illegal aliens in our state. I would expect SNAP benefits especially, but also overlapping into Medicaid and the fraud that's kind of basically been involved in that. It's so obvious, the state's not even pretending that they don't do that. It'll also overlap a little bit into secondary education. So in other words, trying to get non-U.S. citizens to get all of these to be at colleges and bump out native-born Americans from being able to go to college for scholarships and things like that. So I would kind of expect that that's actually ramped up at a much higher likelihood now than I would have said 5 months ago for sure. So especially with the Department of Justice digging into the election rolls, I think that that's quite a bit different now than what we've seen in the past. Let's go into this. Do you think a shutdown of the Department of Education will ever come to fruition? This is from Kiko. My answer is yes, and then related to that is, would we ever notice? One thing to remember about the Department of Education, I'm assuming you're talking about the Federal Department of Education and its relationship to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, or basically public schools in general in Washington State. Number one is the regulatory control or restrictions that potentially exist with the Federal Department of Education, but most of those are carrot and stick kind of things where they say, okay, we want you to give free and reduced lunch, and the carrot for doing that is let us provide you some funding, and if you don't do this, we're not going to give you the money. And because bureaucrats will do almost anything to get more money, including really bad, dumb policies, they basically jump over hoops every time to get extra money in their budget. So the question becomes, with Federal Department of Education, do they stop both the funding but also the requirements that come down from the feds? historically, the average state budget the average school state budget in Washington State Public School usually is only using about 9% of the federal funds. The other 91% of their money comes from state funding or local levies. And so that's really the lion's share of it. The feds only give a small percentage. And if you actually look into federal funding going to most public schools, it's broken into two primary categories with some lesser categories, but really just two primary. Number one, school lunches. That is a huge Department of Ag program that they essentially run through the Department of Education. That is the lion's share of that money. The second one is actually special education funding, SPED funding essentially. And that money is also allocated to the schools from the feds. And there's smaller little amounts after that, but those are almost irrelevant. It's really those two big categories. So you would see if the feds decide to pull away, what I would anticipate that they would do is maybe if the farm lobby loses some of its clout, they would get away from the absurd free and reduced lunch approach to funding. Some of you have watched my videos before, know when I was on the school board in Rochester and the big dispute that we had with the feds over them forcing us to raise lunch prices higher than we actually had to raise them in our community because we are sourcing local food and we had a better price than what the feds said we should be charging them. And so they were threatening us with pulling the funding unless we showed a clear path to increase the amount of money that we were charging our families for lunches. And so I tried to say, let's just raise it to prove that we were on our path to reach your stupid federal amount. We would just raise it. We would demonstrate movement in the direction that the feds wanted us to go by raising it a penny a year. And I felt like in 200 years we'd be in compliance with whatever the feds wanted us to do. They came back, so that wasn't enough movement, and we had to raise it a nickel a year, and that's eventually how we compromised on it. We spent a year. That was our involvement with the feds. We wasted a year that'll never get back on the stupidest argument fight I could ever imagine, forcing us to raise price of lunch to our community more than we needed to, just to satisfy whatever the requirements are. There is a level of egregious incompetence that government creates with policy choices that sound good on the surface and the implementation is disastrous, and I don't know that it'll ever be good. So getting them out of these areas would be good. If the Department of Education is ended, I think that's possible, but most likely what would probably happen is you could have it turn into something like a federal Department of Transportation model could be, which is where it essentially is a pass-through funding mechanism and it doesn't have all these other strings and programs attached. The risk if you leave it like that is that, of course, future bureaucrats will find excuses and ways to bloat it so that they get their tentacles into how government operates at a local level. So I'd rather just eliminate forever. But my guess is they end up going to this compromise sort of thing where they eventually use it. Or the other thing, they'll use it just to kick this money out. The other potential option you have is the school choice program, which if they do push that, the Department of Education seems to be the logical path through which the feds would push that. I'm just so not used to the feds pushing for anything good that I still would be skeptical and would still rather eliminate the agencies. That's not the only one out there, but it'd be one of them. I agree. I saw this comment here from Terry. Yes, let's hope the Department of Education does shut down. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Chris Friedman, how about a citizens initiative for state workers, including governor and agency heads, to be in a physical location and be available and eliminate work from home policies? That's a great point. One of the things that has existed in the past, and I believe that it's still true, and I got to do a little bit more research constitutionally, but I believe that there was a requirement in state government in the Constitution that certain positions had to be located, and the people who held those positions had to be, home based out of government. But one of the things, and that was the governor, lieutenant governor, AG, secretary of state, treasurer, if I remember right. It didn't apply to things as much like OSPI or like the insurance commissioner, or even the DNR, the public lands commissioner, for example. But those other positions really clearly look like they have to be located in Washington or in the capital, state capital, which is in Olympia. The thing is, when that was written at the time, horse and buggy was the rule. The automobile actually wasn't created yet. or wasn't really invented or widespread to any level. Our state was founded in 1889, and the most of the drafting of the state constitution occurred the year before. So automobiles were kind of a distant theoretical future coming. And so the idea of both communication and transportation, the ability of somebody to work from home or effectively travel around the state as fast as they can, didn't really exist back then at all. And so it could be that we have to revisit that and look at it. And you could do some of that through an initiative. You certainly could force state workers to work from home. I'm not sure that you can enforce that on elected officials as much. So I like what you're thinking, though. Eric Vasquez. Hi, Glenn. I'm a college student thinking of applying for a legislative internship for next session. What, if anything, do you know about the program? I think it's a great program. And I would absolutely recommend strongly that you apply and get that program. My son did it. My wife is a school teacher, and she's helped a lot of other students get those as well. I think it's a great program. You should do it. There's nothing like understanding how the sausage is made by looking at the sausage factory behind the scenes, and you will see a lot of it when you are at legislative aid, and I think it's a good idea. It's an internship, sorry, I know the difference, but I think it's a great program, so please do that if you can. Jason, and by the way, there's two different programs, sorry, going back to that. There's a high school and then a college program. They are different, but either program's great. If you got a kid, especially if they live close enough that you can get them into one of those programs, I think it's really worth doing. Jason Fisher, do you think any of the Seattle Stooges has any chance of being reelected, or should we look forward to another freak show and Seattle's continued race to the bottom? Well, I mean, here's the thing. Top two primary, you got two people there. You have bad and incompetent, which is your incumbent, Bruce Harrell, and then Crazy Nutty running against him. And sometimes you decide, well, we know that he's dumb, but maybe he's trying to appeal to people that are somewhat sane to retain his position, whereas the other person's just flat out crazy. Now, there's two different approaches that people oftentimes have, whereas elect the crazy one, and then they'll dive the city into the ground so much faster that it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. You get it over with, and then you restore sanity afterwards. I generally don't take that approach. I do try to recommend that we elect when you have two crazies on the ballot or two levels of incompetence, that you elect the least incompetent or the least crazy one if you have that choice. So that would be my recommendations. I see there's somebody there with a question about where's your stimulus check. That's decoy. Where's my stimulus check? No idea. Maybe it's stolen. Who knows? Chaz E. How could voters so ignorantly think that the small business taxes, the increase in fuel taxes, wouldn't have a deleterious effect on their pocketbooks? I actually think that's a great question, Chaz, but I'm going to tell you probably most people didn't even know it happened. And that's how they could be that ignorant. They just don't even know that it occurred. And oftentimes, listen, put yourself in the shoes of, and many people even watching this video probably find that they feel this way too. How are you living your day-to-day life? Maybe if you're watching me and you're watching Brandy Cruz or you're paying attention to what's going on in the news, you're a consumer of news in a way that requires you just by consuming it, that you're going to be more educated than most people. But the vast majority of the population around you, easily 85% of them or more, this is the last thing they're going to do is get on a live stream with Glen Morgan or get on or watch Brandy Cruz or even turn on Cairo News. I mean, they're not going to look at it most of the time. They're not listening to 770 or 570 AM in Seattle. They just aren't. They're not aware of what's going on around them. And so they're caught up in whether their kids can read, whether their second or third part-time job, they get there in time, whether the car's broken down or not, whether they're going to re-roof before the rains come, whether the lawn gets mowed or the garbage gets taken out, or they can help their student deal with recovering from a drug addiction or take care of their parents. I mean, there's all kinds of personal drama the vast majority of people are dealing with on a regular basis. Many people watching this video, you're probably dealing with stuff like that too sometimes. You just have an ability to segment your time so that you can actually be more aware of what's happening around you in the community. But most people probably aren't paying attention to that, getting the kids to soccer games, whatever it is. Or just partying on the weekend, I don't know, but there's a lot of things that people just have in their lives that they're going to pay more attention to and that seem more relevant to them. And so the truth is, it's not that they knew it happened and they didn't think it mattered. The truth is most of them didn't even know it happened. And so they discover after the fact. Listen, I've had these conversations my entire life with people, sometimes complaining about something that happened 20 years before. And so you're telling them, listen, man, that happened a long time ago, and you're really late to the party to argue about the Growth Management Act, or whatever it is that they just discovered. So people don't tend to pay attention to those things until it directly personally impacts them. The mistake that Democrats made this cycle, one of many, but definitely one that from a political standpoint is probably going to come back to haunt them, is that they passed a bunch of stupid extra little bonus taxes that hit pretty much every single business owner in Washington state, across the board, gig economy people for speaking engagements, all kinds of stuff. And suddenly a bunch of people that weren't that interested in politics suddenly became that interested, wondering how this happened. My warning, of course, and this is a warning that's been around for a long time, is that just because you aren't interested in politics, it doesn't mean it's not interested in you. These people have discovered that. My guess is going to affect how they vote moving forward, at least for some percentage of them. Let's see. John Jacobson, 50-year resident of Washington State, watch the decline and feel I have no recourse but to move. Should I stay or should I go? I wouldn't leave yet, but obviously everybody makes their own decision. If you were in an urban setting, I always recommend moving a little bit more rural, but that's my bias. I believe living rurally is a better lifestyle, regardless of what state you live in. The funny thing is, if you have friends or know people in other states and they live rurally, there's a lot of similarities in how they live their lives. And if you live in an urban environment, most of the time there's a lot of similarities as well, and it's not as good. There's not a lot of upside that I see to living in an urban environment, but that's how it goes. Let's see. Nighthawk Sim, what are the chances of a Republican being voted in for governor? Well, in 2028, we'll have to see. I would be able to answer that question more accurately after 2026 and after the Department of Justice lawsuit with the state and the voter roll cleanup. And then I think I could tell you, get a pretty good sense at that point in time. Jason Fisher, what's your thoughts on UK looking to implement digital ID? Apparently, conservative voters are ready to race towards this policy. Are the citizens that much of a bunch of sheep? And I think it's a terrible idea, and the answer is that in England, I think they are that much of a sheep. I don't know how conservative people are really pushing for that. They're probably thinking that somehow is going to clean up their illegal immigration problem, but I doubt it. But, who knows? And then here's a point. This is actually not a question, but I'll bring it out anyway. Wolf Lord, I find that many people complain about everything they don't like happening, but then they don't try to fix it or help others fix it. And that's true. I mean, that's a human nature thing more than anything else. Part of this is just because people are naturally lazy. And so, and to be fair, and I think it's kind of important to remember this, is that oftentimes people also want to focus on the things that are much more immediately tangible in their own life. Again, that leaking roof, the repair on the car, getting the kids to the soccer game, having date night, partying on the weekend, what you're going to watch on Netflix. If you think about it, most people's lives, whether they're single, whether they're married, whether they have a business, whether they just have a day-to-day job they go to, whatever it is, that is ample distraction and time consumption for most people. It's strange, those of us who actually pay a lot more attention to the political process, that we're a strange bunch. And so because of that, you have to sometimes remember that most people aren't thinking things that way. Listen, I know there's a bunch of people watching this video because I do run videos like this anyway, if not this live stream. Different type of person watches the live stream videos that I produce versus the regular videos that I produce. But there's probably 80-85% of the people that watch my regular videos that aren't ever going to come to a Republican function. They're not going to come to a Doge Washington training. They're not going to come to that level of direct involvement. And they're already way ahead of the curve because they're actually paying attention to what's going on if they're watching my videos. You got to be kind of a wonkish, involved and interested person to do that, and you're going to care about the state or the politics a little bit if you're going to do that. But you're still not at that level where you're going to be highly engaged and involved. And most of the time, people are afraid to be engaged and involved. But again, it only takes a very small percentage of the population to be engaged and effectively involved to change it. Historically, this has always been true. The magic number actually has been assumed to be around 3%. So if you have 3% or more of the population trying to be engaged and involved and very active in shifting the direction of politics, the political class, or the policies that you have in a local government, that's usually enough to completely change the direction in politics. I've witnessed it before myself. Many of you might have as well. that group of people tends to bring the rest along with them. And so it's just like early adopters in technology. It's like, beginning people that start businesses early on. There's a level of energy and motivation and knowledge and skill that ends up bringing a bunch of people with you. So what I do with a lot of the Doge Washington training, those of you who've taken my classes, you might have heard me talk about this in some of them, but I'm really trying to find that 3%, right? The people that are actually willing to engage and involve on a topic or an issue that's going to shift the ball down the road and improve things and move it in a good direction. So I'm hoping that might be you. You might know somebody that's that person. Maybe you decide you're going to help in a different way. You don't have to do the exact same thing that I'm doing. You have to follow your passion and something that matters to you. It could be your local school, local city, local county, port district, whatever's caught your fancy or your concern. Focusing on that is the most effective way of probably making change. That I think is what actually ends up changing a state and a community. And it does start local. You can't immediately go out and change what's going on in DC 3,000 miles away. Very difficult. And most of us won't have much of an impact back there no matter what we do. We can have a huge impact in our community though, especially if you're willing to work with others and work productively and just showing up and doing something. Again, I say that because I always close all my videos, as many of you know, with the future belongs to those who show up. And I really believe that. Now, this was kind of my second live stream that I've done since I took about a month off of doing these live streams. Let me know what you think about these in the comment section below. I will answer one more question because I just saw it pop up here, and this is from Johnny Rebel. Do you ever come out to the Tri-Cities? I do all the time. I was just there yesterday, actually. But I did a Doge Washington training there a little while ago. If you want me to do another one, reach out to your local Republican group or conservative group in the area. I don't care who, but get them to take point on organizing it, and I'll happily come out there. Inevitably, I will be back out there in the Tri-Cities again, doing an event, or I'll be speaking at one of their. I actually think I am. Next year, I'm pretty sure I'm speaking at the Benton County Republicans as well, now that I think about it. But anyway, I totally understand if you can't do it, but if you're interested, reach out to them. Usually these are weekday nights, so that's when I do the training. And then I'm going to start to do a little series pretty soon talking about very specific kind of categories of information to make you a more effective Doge Washington type person, what you'd be looking for, and to make an impact where you live. So, but with that, I'm going to kind of close this out. I'm actually doing some filming later tonight and trying to finish up the script that or at least the presentation I'm doing. In case you don't know, I'm not working off of some kind of teleprompter script. That's probably obvious when you see the live stream. But the same is true for most of the videos that I do. I don't have a script that I'm working off of. So I have to know the topic and just I put together basically a sequence of images that help keep me on topic while I'm discussing it. And I try to present it in a way that's hopefully useful, impactful, educational, and helpful for people that are actually watching the videos. But I still have to finish some of that stuff up tonight, so I've got a little bit more to go. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope all is well. Be safe out there. Remember, get to know, take care of your family, focus on the things that matter in your life. Also get to know your neighbors. If in tough times, those are the people you need to be engaged and involved with. And we are inevitably going through a lot of change out there, and it's going to be much more effective if we're engaged and involved and aware of what's happening around us. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below if you're watching this when it's not live. And otherwise, hopefully you enjoy the rest of the videos. I'm hoping to put out a bunch more this week. We'll see if I get my act together and I can actually do that. Hope all's well, and we'll see you next week.